In this video, we are going to talk about top 10 most unusual rules that prisoners have to follow. So before starting this video, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for the future updates. There shall be no discrimination on the grounds of race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth or any other status. The religious beliefs and moral precepts of prisoners shall be respected. Here's a list of the top 10 most unusual rules that prisoners have to follow. Let's start. Number 10. Basic principles for the treatment of prisoners. Basic principles for the treatment of prisoners. All prisoners shall be treated with the respect due to their inherent dignity and value as human beings. There shall be no discrimination on the grounds of race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth or other status. It is, however, desirable to respect the religious beliefs and cultural precepts of the group to which prisoners belong, whenever local conditions so require. The responsibility of prisons for the custody of prisoners and for the protection of society against crime shall be discharged in keeping with the state's other social objectives and its fundamental responsibilities for promoting the well-being and development of all members of society. Except for those limitations that are demonstrably necessitated by the fact of incarceration, all prisoners shall retain the human rights and fundamental freedoms set out in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and, where the state concerned is a party, the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the optional protocol thereto, as well as such other rights as are set out in other United Nations covenants. All prisoners shall have the right to take part in cultural activities and education aimed at the full development of the human personality. Efforts addressed to the abolition of solitary confinement as a punishment, or to the restriction of its use, should be undertaken and encouraged. Number 9. Human rights. Human rights considerations. A sentence of imprisonment constitutes only a deprivation of the basic right to liberty. It does not entail the restriction of other human rights, with the exception of those which are naturally restricted by the very fact of being in prison. Prison reform is necessary to ensure that this principle is respected, the human rights of prisoners protected, and their prospects for social reintegration increased, in compliance with relevant international standards and norms. Number 8. Imprisonment and poverty. Imprisonment and poverty disproportionately affects individuals and families living in poverty. When an income-generating member of the family is imprisoned, the rest of the family must adjust to this loss of income. The impact can be especially severe in poor, developing countries where the state does not provide financial assistance to the indigent and where it is not unusual for one breadwinner to financially support an extended family network. Thus, the family experiences financial losses as a result of the imprisonment of one of its members, exacerbated by the new expenses that must be met, such as the cost of a lawyer, food for the imprisoned person, transport to prison for visits, and so on. When released, often with no prospects for employment, former prisoners are generally subject to socioeconomic exclusion and are thus vulnerable to an endless cycle of poverty, marginalization, criminality, and imprisonment. Thus, imprisonment contributes directly to the impoverishment of the prisoner, of his family and of society by creating future victims and reducing future potential economic performance. Number 7. Health. Public health consequences of imprisonment. Prisons have very serious health implications. Prisoners are likely to have existing health problems on entry to prison, as they are predominantly from poorly educated and socioeconomically deprived sectors of the general population, with minimal access to adequate health services. Their health conditions deteriorate in prisons which are overcrowded, where nutrition is poor, sanitation inadequate, and access to fresh air and exercise often unavailable. Psychiatric disorders, HIV infection, tuberculosis, hepatitis B and C, sexually transmitted diseases, skin diseases, malaria, malnutrition, diarrhea, and injuries including self-mutilation are the main causes of morbidity and mortality in prison. In countries with a high prevalence of TB in the outside community, prevalence of TB can be up to 100 times higher inside the prisons. In most countries, HIV infection in prisons is significantly higher than within the population outside prison, especially where drug addiction and risk behaviors are prevalent. Prison staff are also vulnerable to most of the diseases of which prisoners are at risk. Number 6. Categories of prisoners. Separation of categories. The different categories of prisoners shall be kept in separate institutions or parts of institutions taking account of their sex, age, criminal record, the legal reason for their detention and the necessities of their treatment. Thus, men and women shall so far as possible be detained in separate institutions. In an institution which receives both men and women, the whole of the premises allocated to women shall be entirely separate. Untried prisoners shall be kept separate from convicted prisoners. Persons imprisoned for debt and other civil prisoners shall be kept separate from persons imprisoned by reason of a criminal offense. Young prisoners shall be kept separate from adults. Number 5. Accommodation. Where sleeping accommodation is in individual cells or rooms, each prisoner shall occupy by night a cell or room by himself. If for special reasons, such as temporary overcrowding, it becomes necessary for the Central Prison Administration to make an exception to this rule, it is not desirable to have 2 prisoners in a cell or room. Where dormitories are used, they shall be occupied by prisoners carefully selected as being suitable to associate with one another in those conditions. There shall be regular supervision by night, in keeping with the nature of the institution. All accommodation provided for the use of prisoners, and in particular all sleeping accommodation, shall meet all requirements of health, due regard being paid to climatic conditions and particularly to cubic content of air, minimum floor space, lighting, heating, and ventilation. In all places where prisoners are required to live or work, the windows shall be large enough to enable the prisoners to read or work by natural light, and shall be so constructed that they can allow the entrance of fresh air whether or not there is artificial ventilation. Artificial light shall be provided sufficient for the prisoners to read or work without injury to eyesight. The sanitary installations shall be adequate to enable every prisoner to comply with the needs of nature when necessary and in a clean and decent manner. Number 4. Clothing. Every prisoner who is not allowed to wear his own clothing shall be provided with an outfit of clothing suitable for the climate and adequate to keep him in good health. Such clothing shall in no manner be degrading or humiliating. All clothing shall be clean and kept in proper condition. Underclothing shall be changed and washed as often as necessary for the maintenance of hygiene. In exceptional circumstances, whenever a prisoner is removed outside the institution for an authorized purpose, he shall be allowed to wear his own clothing or other inconspicuous clothing. If prisoners are allowed to wear their own clothing, arrangements shall be made on their admission to the institution to ensure that it shall be clean and fit for use. Every prisoner shall, in accordance with local or national standards, be provided with a separate bed, and with separate and sufficient bedding which shall be clean when issued, kept in good order and changed often enough to ensure its cleanliness. Number 3. Food. Every prisoner shall be provided by the administration at the usual hours with food of nutritional value adequate for health and strength, of wholesome quality and well prepared and served. Drinking water shall be available to every prisoner whenever he needs it. Every prisoner who is not employed in outdoor work shall have at least 1 hour of suitable exercise in the open air daily if the weather permits. Young prisoners, and others of suitable age and physique, shall receive physical and recreational training during the period of exercise. To this end, space, installations and equipment should be provided. Number 2. Medical services. At every institution there shall be available the services of at least one qualified medical officer who should have some knowledge of psychiatry. The medical services should be organized in close relationship to the general health administration of the community or nation. They shall include a psychiatric service for the diagnosis and, in proper cases, the treatment of states of mental abnormality. Sick prisoners who require specialist treatment shall be transferred to specialized institutions or to civil hospitals. Where hospital facilities are provided in an institution, their equipment, furnishings and pharmaceutical supplies shall be proper for the medical care and treatment of sick prisoners, and there shall be a staff of suitable trained officers. The services of a qualified dental officer shall be available to every prisoner. In women's institutions there shall be special accommodation for all necessary prenatal and postnatal care and treatment. Arrangements shall be made wherever practicable for children to be born in a hospital outside the institution. If a child is born in prison, this fact shall not be mentioned in the birth certificate. Number 1. Discipline. Discipline and punishment. Discipline and order shall be maintained with firmness, but with no more restriction than is necessary for safe custody and well-ordered community life. No prisoner shall be employed, in the service of the institution, in any disciplinary capacity. This rule shall not, however, impede the proper functioning of systems based on self-government, under which specified social, educational or sports activities or responsibilities are entrusted, under supervision, to prisoners who are formed into groups for the purposes of treatment. What do you think of our video? Let me know in the comments section below. If you enjoy this video and want to hear from me again, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go. Thanks for watching.